Well, welcome back. Hopefully, everyone got their workout, which was much needed for a very exciting session. I'm Navrina Singh. I'm the founder and CEO of Credo AI. We are an AI startup focused on bringing oversight and accountability to all the artificial intelligence systems, including generative AI, but also extending to predictive ML. Today is a very exciting day because we are going to give you a sneak preview into a new capability that we are launching over the coming months alongside our partners, Booz Allen. So I would love to introduce Graham from Booz Allen to talk a little bit more about our partnership.
Thanks, Navrina. Graham Gilmer from Booz Allen. Very excited that you all joined us. Not even a fire alarm could stop this demo this afternoon. We're up here supporting Credo because this is an urgent issue to follow through on the executive order and the recent OMB memo around implementation of the executive order guidelines. AI governance is now a requirement for all federal agencies. Booz Allen is moving out. We're doing so in partnership with Credo. We've been partners for over a year. Our CEO was just on the SCSP podcast over there talking about this very important topic. And we're thrilled to give you a sneak preview, as we said, about a joint offering that we're working on together about how we can lift federal agencies towards compliance. Ehrik, take us away.
All right.
Yeah.
I think getting told to use one of these microphones, great. And this one will be all right. Wonderful. All right, great. Thanks. Well, hi everybody. My name is Ehrik Aldana. I'm on the product team at Credo AI, and I'm really excited to share with you a little bit about Credo AI's governance platform. How do we take all of these different governance requirements that, as Graham mentioned, are no longer, now they're mandatory, they're no longer optional, and how do we actually operationalize these within our agencies, enterprises, and organizations overall? So really quickly, just want to highlight right now, as Graham mentioned, AI usage, risks, and compliance requirements are growing faster than ever. In December of 2020, we saw our first federal executive order that was requiring agencies to create inventories for their AI systems. And since then, we've seen a number of different regulations, guidelines, and additional executive action taken to make sure that we're governing different AI systems, both within public use, as well as kind of giving indications for how we want to be thinking about this in the commercial space. So things we want to call out are the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, guidelines for how to think about managing risk for organizations and use cases, the executive order from last fall, that specifically identifies what are the best principles and best practices to mitigate the harms of AI for public use of AI. And then just this past March, the requirements for federal agencies to actually use AI in their procurement, and especially what are the different requirements for rights or safety impacting AI systems. Currently, 20 of 23 agencies are registering AI use cases, with about 1,200 planned or currently in use. So definitely we're starting to see a large amount of the need for AI to actually spur innovation and carry out the missions of these agencies, and also the need to make sure they're done responsibly. So some of the things that I want to call out that we're seeing in a lot of these requirements, both at the federal level, but also on the global level with the things like the EU AI Act passing, ISO 42001, which is an AI management standard that was provided by ISO and IEC. Some of the things that we're starting to see are things like our AI use case inventory. One of the things that I want to call out here is that the inventory is for the AI use case, not necessarily a model or a data set, which is really important, and I'll get into that in just a little bit. Specific compliance requirements based on the risk of that use case. So depending on whether or not a use case might impact the rights or safety of individuals that it's being used on, there might be different requirements that you need to meet. Additionally, if it's using generative AI, there might be additional requirements. In addition to just the compliance components, we also want to make sure that we are engaging in appropriate AI risk management. So what are the types of risks that are coming up that might not be covered by regulations? And this is incredibly important, since we all know with AI at the pace at which it's developing, the total risk, the risk surface increases as well. And we know that there are more and more unknown unknowns that we need to be tracking, especially again, as the technology develops. And then finally, how do we actually make sure that this process of understanding our use cases, documenting them, keeping track of the regulations, keeping track of the technology, while all of this is adapting, right? We have hundreds of new bills every single year being introduced, many of them passing as it relates to AI. Federal agencies are creating their own regulations on how to manage AI. So we want to make sure that in this adaptive environment, we are keeping track of everything in one central location. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and pivot over to our demo. So the Credo AI governance platform is a software tool that we're using to help you do just that. Understand what your AI use cases are, what are the different requirements, compliance, or risk that you need to meet, and then ultimately, how do you take that information and present it to folks who might need it, whether they're internal stakeholders, clients. If you're an enterprise that's trying to sell into government, how do you show the agencies that you're compliant with these needs? So I'm going to go ahead and pivot over to the platform. Great. So this is the Credo AI governance platform. And the first place that I want to start is the AI use case inventory. So again, all the way back in 2020, the very first executive order related to AI documented, you actually need to go out and register. What are all the different AI use cases that you're using within an agency? And so again, one thing I want to call out is the importance of identifying the use case, not just the model. We also have a model registry where you can identify, what are the different types of models that are relevant to your particular use case, things like GPT 3.5 or GPT 4. You might have an in-house model that you're developing, but how these models are being used are incredibly important. What is the additional context that is needed to understand how to govern it? For example, using GPT-4 for a chatbot for marketing should be regulated entirely different from GPT-4 for medical diagnostics or providing advice on medical issues. So back to that AI use case registry. One thing now I want to kind of dive into, what does it actually look like to govern a particular use case? So I'm going to click into this system. It's called an HR decision system. So I want to go through the what, the who, the how. So what is it? Here we're documenting what is actually the AI use case. What is it being used for? We have a candidate match evaluator that's being used to help screen job applicants. We have information about what is the model that's being used. There's a regression model. Who are the stakeholders that are involved with this particular project? These could be technical folks who are actually developing. These could be folks on the legal team who are providing additional oversight of the particular use case. And then as we go on, we also are collecting additional information. What regions is it being used in? What are the different types of tasks that the AI systems are performing? And all of these are incredibly important context to determine, what are actually the ways that we want to go about governing a system. So you'll see here, and I'll go into this just a little bit, how to determine a risk category. So this use case has been determined as rights impacting. And as a result, we have a number of different risk scenarios that we want to call out to mitigate, as well as different compliance requirements that we want to identify. So I'll click into this compliance plan here, and we'll see that there are things like the NIST AI risk management framework, for example. So this is one of the guidelines that I mentioned earlier that talks about how one might actually go about managing risks of a particular use case, as well as, because if you remember, when we were looking at what are the regions that this is being used in New York, there actually is a law in New York that's related to automated employment decision-making tools, and what are the requirements you need to do in order to actually ensure that you're compliant with this particular law. So we've applied these different requirements based on the information that you've provided. You can input information, whether they're documentation evidence, they could be technical evidence that provides information about things like, what are bias metrics that are related with the system? How do you actually indicate whether or not your system is meeting the requirements that are based on these different laws and regulations? And so these are all things that you can keep track of in one place. And again, as laws change, as laws are added, we're going to be adjusting, our library of laws, policies, regulations to make sure that you're up to date with the most relevant policies that are out there. So one thing that Navrina and Graham mentioned is we want to highlight, how is this actually going to help federal agencies, especially that want to apply the OMB guidelines that came as part of the executive order. So one example that we might want to call out is, an AI system called AIDEN. It's being used by federal student aid under the Department of Education. this is one of the use cases that is captured in that public use case inventory. There's all sorts of information about how it's being used, and so uploading that into Credo AI, we would create FSA AIDN, provide some sort of description, student aid, chatbot, and then begin that use case. So this is an example of me going through the intake process of identifying information about that particular use case. And so I, as someone who is maybe a product manager who wants to register this use case, make sure that is in compliance, I provide all of this sort of information. Is our agency under the particular scope of the OMB guidance? There's some additional questions related to, is it a safety impacting use case? Is it a rights impacting use case? And as I fill this information out, all of that context is feeding the platform to understand what are the different types of risks, what are the different types of compliance requirements that need to be surfaced. So I'll go ahead and show you now. So if I were to click on a new review, send it to our governance team to review. So who's the person of the organization that's responsible for monitoring all of this, keeping track of that registry. I'll flip over to that governance persona. Just one moment. So we can look at AIDN chat. So based on that information that was provided, and so I've kind of filled this out with some of the information that we've seen before, that was from that website. On this particular use case, we can capture, what is the description of the use case. Because of the answers that were provided, it was actually indicated that it's rights impacting. And because it's rights impacting, we have these additional requirements that were added to this use case. So we see OMB requirements for rights and safety impacting AI, as well as additional requirements for rights impacting AI. And so if I go into here, I can see what are all of the different requirements that are needed. I can assign each of these requirements to be covered by individuals on my team, and ultimately track compliance with these particular use cases. And so finally, I want to showcase, if you're we saw that, there are about 1,200 different use cases as of December 2023, that report that I was showing, that are being used in the federal government across 20 agencies. If you're an agency that is using, hundreds of different use cases, you want to make sure that you have a good view of what are the use cases that are rights or safety impacting? What are the types of risks that are coming up more commonly? So maybe I can invest in resources to address those particular risks. So we need to be able to have some sort of higher dashboard level of our particular agency so we can see across our organization what are all of the different use cases that are being used, how many are rights impacting, how many are safety impacting, as well as what are the different types of compliance requirements that are coming up, and how is my organization meeting those different requirements. So I only had about 10 minutes to actually get through this demo part. There's a lot to cover, and I'm only just kind of scratching the surface in terms of what we're doing to ensure that AI governance is something that is achievable, attainable, it's easy, it's fast, and something that anyone can do, especially as it's becoming more and more of a requirement, but also how can it be used to actually spur innovation within your agency, within your enterprise or organization. So I'll pause there. We're at booth 345 if folks would like to continue this conversation and chat with our team. Otherwise, please feel free to check us out at credo.ai. And thank you so much.